Under the dim glow of chandeliers shaped like frozen stars, the hum of wealth whispered through every corner of Le Pavon, the most exclusive restaurant in the heart of the city. It was a night draped in velvet stillness, broken only by the soft elegance of a piano weaving through the air. Every table was a quiet kingdom of power and prestige, lit by candles and crowned by crystal dye. In the farthest corner, tucked behind an arrangement of orchids and shadow, sat John Maxwell, 48 years old, tech mogul, billionaire, and widower. His Armani suit was tailored to perfection, his platinum watch catching stray flickers of light, but none of it could cover the hollowness in his chest. He stared blankly at the untouched filet mignon before him, its aroma rich and inviting, though it might as well have been dust. Across from him, the empty chair echoed more loudly than any sound in the room. His fingers tightened slightly around the stem of a Bordeaux glass, the red swirl inside dancing like a ghost. 10 years had passed since the accident, since his wife Lillian and their 3-year-old son Caleb had vanished from the world in the crush of twisted metal and shattered glass. Since then, John had filled his life with silence, routine, and an empire of distractions. He lifted the glass slowly, as if the weight of it held memories. But just as he brought it to his lips, a voice broke the air beside him, soft, trembling, unexpected. "May I have your leftovers, sir?" John froze. He turned his head sharply and found himself looking down at a young woman standing beside his table. She could not have been older than 19. Her blonde hair was pulled into a loose, messy bun with strands falling out in weary curls. Her coat was threadbare, clinging to her shoulders against the early autumn chill. In her arms was a baby, perhaps 7 or 8 months old, wrapped in a faded blanket. The infant's eyes, white and luminous, were fixed on the mound of mashed potatoes and slices of meat still steaming on John's plate. Around him, the room stilled. Forks paused midair. Conversations trailed into stunned silence. A waiter began to step forward, concern already wrinkling his brow, but John raised a hand subtly. He studied her face. There was no shame in her expression, no hint of manipulation or pity-seeking, only exhaustion and something deeper, a quiet fierceness, a need not for herself, but for the tiny life held close to her chest. She was not begging. She was surviving. John's throat tightened. The candle between them flickered. In that instant, something shifted inside him. He stood there for a long moment, his gaze locked on the girl. Her blonde hair was unbrushed, falling in disheveled waves around her face. Her coat barely covered her frame, sleeves too short, the fabric worn thin. On her feet were a pair of sneakers tattered, soaked in city grime, and nearly splitting at the seams. But it was not her appearance that made John's breath catch. It was her eyes. They did not beg. They did not waver. They held him unflinching, filled with something far stronger than desperation, dignity, and a quiet, almost unbearable sorrow. She was asking for her child. John hesitated just a heartbeat longer, then nudged the plate forward. "Take it," he said softly. She did not dive at the food. Instead, with a reverence that struck him harder than any scream could have, she reached into the satchel draped across her shoulder and took out a small square of cloth, clean though fraying at the edges. She carefully wrapped the mashed potatoes and the remaining slices of meat inside, folding the corners like she was preserving treasure. Then, kneeling gently onto one knee, she cradled the baby closer and retrieved a small plastic spoon from her coat pocket. John watched, unblinking, as she scooped a modest portion of the warm food and blew softly on it before guiding the spoon to the baby's mouth. The moment the mashed potatoes touched his tongue, he cooed. A soft, gurgling sound of joy so pure, it made John's fingers curl around the edge of the table. The baby's face lit up in the glow of candlelight, his chubby hands patting the girl's chest, a smile blooming across his round cheeks like a sunrise after a long frozen night. It was the kind of smile John had not seen in years, not since his own son. The girl said nothing. She simply kept feeding him one spoonful at a time with infinite patience. She did not once look around to see who might be judging her. She was there for one reason only, to feed her son. John's heart twisted in his chest. It was not pity. It was the undeniable truth that he was witnessing something sacred, a kind of love that could not be bought, replaced, or even fully understood by those who had never felt loss. When the baby seemed full, the girl carefully tucked the cloth bundle into her bag, adjusted the blanket around the child's body, and stood. She glanced once more at John, nodding slightly, then turned and walked away, weaving through the rows of white linen tables out into the cool night beyond the glass doors. John remained seated, unable to move, staring at the spot where she had stood. Then, before he could rationalize or talk himself out of it, he rose quietly, with purpose. He placed his napkin on the table and followed the girl through the heavy restaurant doors into the night. John followed at a distance, his footsteps muffled against the quiet pavement. The girl slipped down a narrow alleyway, clutching the baby to her chest. The alley opened into a crumbling parking lot flanked by brick buildings. Abandoned cars sat like ghosts, but one, an old dented Navy sedan, was different. It was lived in. She walked to it without hesitation, opened the back door, and carefully settled in with the baby. A thin blanket served as a mattress. She cradled the infant in her arms, whispering something only the child could hear. Then her voice rose, soft and trembling, to a lullaby. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." John lingered in the shadows, transfixed. He stepped forward. Something must have alerted her. She turned, startled, their eyes locked. "I'm sorry," he said, hands raised in peace. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." "You followed me," she said, guarded. "Yes, I did." She didn't run. She only looked at him, weighing the stranger in the expensive clothes. "I saw how you fed your son," John said. "I've never seen anything like that." I needed to understand. After a pause, she said quietly, "His name is Noah." "I'm Emily." "Noah," he repeated. 8 months? She nodded. "He loves mashed potatoes." John's voice dropped. "So did my son." Emily blinked. And in that instant, something shifted. "I was studying to be a nurse," she said. "Then I got pregnant. The father disappeared. My parents disowned me. I've been on my own ever since. We've lived in this car for 2 months. I clean houses, wait tables when I can." John looked at the vehicle, the worn blanket, the baby clothes stacked in the corner. "I can help. A hotel, food, whatever you need." She raised a hand. "No. I'm not asking for money." Surprised, he asked, "Then what do you want?" Emily looked at Noah and said softly, "Just one day. One day where he's warm, full, and safe. That's all." The words hit him harder than any demand ever could. The streetlight flickered above them. In that glow, John saw something familiar. Her eyes. His late wife's eyes. Not exactly, but close enough to crack something inside him. The way Emily clutched her child. The way she stood tall with nothing but love as armor. It stirred something in him that had been buried with his wife and son. He stepped back, suddenly unsteady. "Thank you," he said. Emily furrowed her brow. "For what?" "For reminding me I still have a heart." She said nothing, only cradled Noah tighter, resuming the lullaby. John stood there a little longer, the song threading through the night like a lifeline. From that night on, John could not shake the image of the girl with the broken shoes and the baby with the mashed potato smile. He began to act silently and precisely. He found her car again, parked behind an abandoned church lot. Without approaching, he left small packages near the vehicle in the early mornings: a canister of baby formula, a pack of diapers, a sealed container of homemade soup, still warm. He arranged for a pediatrician to make a discreet visit, pretending to be part of a church outreach program. Emily didn't know who had sent him, but when the doctor left, she held Noah longer than usual and whispered, "Thank you," to no one in particular. At first, Emily was skeptical. But these quiet gestures never came with notes, never came with expectations. Little by little, suspicion gave way to something more dangerous: hope. Then one evening, as October cold began seeping deeper into the nights, disaster struck. Noah had been cranky all afternoon, refusing to eat. His forehead was warm, but by nightfall, he was burning with fever. Emily tried everything, but his cries grew more urgent, his breathing shallow and fast. She rushed to the nearest hospital emergency room. When asked about insurance, Emily hesitated. When she said she didn't have any, the woman's face hardened. "We're at full capacity," she said curtly. "You'll need to wait or find another facility." Emily's voice broke. "He's only a baby. He has a fever of 104. Please. Ma'am, there's nothing we can do without proper intake." "I'm sorry." Emily stepped outside, her breath clouding in the freezing air. Noah had gone quiet, a terrifying silence. There was only one thing left she could do. She pulled out her old phone. Her fingers trembled as she typed just 2 words, "Help us." 6 minutes later, headlights swept across the curb. John's black SUV screeched to a halt. He jumped out, his coat flaring in the wind, eyes wild with urgency. He didn't speak. He simply held out his arms. Emily placed Noah into them. The baby's tiny hand curled around John's index finger, weak but intentional, as if recognizing something safe. John strode back into the hospital without waiting in line. "I want a doctor now," he said to the receptionist, voice steel and fire. "This child has a critical fever. I will cover every cent. But if you let one more minute pass, I will buy this hospital and fire every last one of you." They took Noah immediately. Emily sat in the hallway, shivering with exhaustion. John stayed by her side, silent. When the nurse returned with updates, Noah was stable, resting, and would be monitored overnight. Emily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She looked at John, eyes glassy, voice barely audible. "You came?" He nodded. "Of course I did." Tears spilled over before she could stop them. She leaned into him, chest heaving with relief. Her head rested against his shoulder, and John, without hesitation, wrapped his arms around her. It was the first time Emily had let herself fall apart since she'd become a mother. And for John, it was the first time in 10 years that holding someone didn't feel like betrayal. It began with a photo, slightly blurry, taken at night, of John Maxwell exiting an emergency room with a baby in his arms and a young woman close behind. Within hours, it flooded social media, blogs, and tabloid headlines. Emily's identity didn't stay private for long. Then came the commentary. Waves of speculation, judgment, and cruelty. Some praised John. Others were vicious. In the apartment John had arranged for her and Noah, Emily sat in darkness, the only light from her phone. Each swipe brought more venom. Each headline more shame. She turned off the screen, afraid the light alone might touch her son with that same poison. When John walked in, he knew something had changed. "I can't do this," she said. "I don't want my son growing up in scandal. I don't want him seeing lies one day and wondering if they're true." John sat beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "Neither did Noah." She shook her head. "People don't care. They already decided who I am." John's voice steadied. "Then let me tell them who you really are." That afternoon he called his publicist. The next night, he went live on national television. The setup was simple, a quiet studio, soft lighting, no distractions. John began not with Emily, but with Lillian and Caleb. He told the story he had avoided for years, the accident, the silence, the way grief had hollowed him out. "I stopped living the day they died," he said, and then he spoke of Emily. She wasn't looking for charity. She wasn't even looking for help. She just wanted to feed her son. And in doing so, she woke something in me I thought I had lost forever. His voice cracked. "She didn't take anything from me. She gave me something no one else could, a reason to care again." He looked into the camera. "Emily is not a headline. She is a mother. Noah is not a prop. He is a beautiful child. I did not save them. They saved me." The interview was raw, unguarded, and deeply human. And it worked. The next morning, the tide shifted. People began defending her. Mothers shared their stories. Donations started flowing into shelters. Emily didn't speak to the press. But the next morning, she showed up at John's front door, Noah bundled against the cold. "I'm not leaving," she said. "If you still want us, we're here." John did not speak. He stepped aside, let them in, and for the first time in years, he felt something shift, permanent and peaceful. A door, not just in his home, but in his heart, opened. The apartment John rented for them was nothing extravagant, but warm, sunlit, and quiet. Emily moved in with nothing but 2 duffel bags, a baby carrier, and the weight of someone who had never been given a safe place to exhale. They never discussed what they were to each other. Not at first. They simply lived together. John visited every morning. At first, it was under the pretense of checking in, bringing groceries, but soon it became routine. Noah would light up with recognition at the sound of the door. John learned how to hold a baby bottle at just the right angle, how to warm milk without overheating it, how to change a diaper. He memorized the rhythm of Noah's cries, understood the difference between hunger and discomfort. One afternoon, as he rocked Noah to sleep, the baby's small hand clinging to his shirt, John realized something simple but seismic. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay. Emily noticed it too. The way John lingered, how he listened to Noah's babbles like they were symphonies. He never tried to impress or control. He simply showed up day after day with quiet hands and eyes that had once been hollow but were now slowly refilling with light. One evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Emily and John sat on the balcony in silence. The city below glimmered in gold and blue, but neither of them looked down. John turned toward her, his voice gentle. When I lost Lillian and Caleb, I thought that part of me died with them, the part that wanted to care, to belong, to be needed. Emily looked at him, eyes glistening. You didn't lose it, she whispered. It just waited. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't have to. The moment stretched between them like a promise, unspoken but deeply understood, and in that moment, Emily smiled. Not the kind of smile she gave nurses out of politeness or Noah out of reflex. This one was just for him. For the first time in years, John smiled back, a real smile, quiet, softened by healing, lit from within. It came one afternoon in a plain white envelope, wedged beneath the apartment door. Emily stared at it for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was familiar, tight, neat, and unmistakably her mother's. There were only a few lines. If there's still a chance to know my grandson, I would like to try. Emily sat at the kitchen table for over an hour. When John arrived that evening, he found her in the same spot. She wrote, Emily said quietly. He read the letter, then sat beside her. What are you thinking? I don't know. It's been almost 2 years since they last spoke to me. Since they told me I was no longer their daughter. John nodded slowly. You don't owe them anything. Emily turned to him. But Noah, doesn't he deserve to know where he comes from, even if it's broken? John paused. Don't let him grow up with the same emptiness you had. Let him have the chance to forgive or not, but let him choose. 3 days later, they drove to the town Emily once called home. Her parents' house stood at the end of a gravel driveway, the white paint slightly faded, the porch swing still creaking in the wind. Emily stood outside for several long moments, Noah on her hip. The front door opened slowly. A woman stepped out. Mid-50s, sharp features softened by time and sorrow. Emily's mother. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, with a trembling breath, her mother stepped forward. Her eyes landed on Noah, then on Emily, and they filled instantly with tears. I wasn't strong, she whispered. I was scared of what people would think. Of losing the version of you I thought I raised. And I lost you anyway. Emily said nothing. Her father appeared behind her mother, older than she remembered. He looked at his grandson like he was seeing something holy, and Noah reached out a hand, not knowing the history, not caring, just curious. And that somehow shattered everything. Her mother broke down, stepping forward, arms open but uncertain. May I hold him? Emily hesitated only a moment. Then slowly, she placed Noah in her mother's arms. The older woman clutched him as if trying to hold time itself. She sobbed softly, whispering things to the boy who blinked up at her with innocent wonder. When Emily finally stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother, the porch seemed to breathe. The past had not disappeared, but it had been softened. Forgiveness was not a lightning strike. It was a slow sunrise. That afternoon, they sat around the old kitchen table. Her mother served tea. Her father bounced Noah gently on his knee. And for the first time in years, there was laughter in that house. Emily caught John's gaze from across the room, and he smiled. She mouthed 2 simple words, thank you. He shook his head, smiling back. No, he whispered to himself. Thank you. 1 year later, the world had changed, but only in the ways that mattered. The noise had faded. The headlines were gone. In their place was something far quieter, far more powerful, a life. It was a bright spring afternoon when they returned to the park. The breeze moved gently through the trees, and the golden sunlight bathed the open field in warmth. There were no towering floral arches or photographers, just a small group of close friends, a white linen cloth spread beneath an old oak tree, and a humble wooden arch wrapped with ivy and ribbon. At the center of it all stood a little boy in a navy vest and matching bow tie. Noah, now nearly 2 years old, clutched a small velvet box in both hands as he wobbled across the grass, determined to deliver it to the man waiting just a few steps away. John stood there, not in a designer suit, but in a soft gray blazer. His hair was longer now, with threads of silver he no longer bothered to hide. His eyes, once clouded by grief, now sparkled with hope. As Noah reached him, John knelt down and took the box gently from his tiny fingers. The boy looked up and giggled, then toddled back to where Emily stood barefoot on the grass, her white dress fluttering in the breeze. John stepped forward, box in hand, and dropped to one knee. For a moment, the wind seemed to still. He looked up at her, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "You didn't ask for anything. You didn't beg. You didn't expect. You just showed up on the worst night of your life and gave me a chance to remember what it feels like to be needed, to be alive." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, elegant, unflashy. "You didn't take my leftovers, Emily," he whispered. "You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. You gave me family. You gave me love. You gave me a future." He paused, tears glimmering. "Will you marry me?" Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled before the first tear could even fall. She nodded once, twice, then dropped to her knees in front of him, laughing through her tears as she whispered, "Yes." They embraced, arms folding into one another like pieces of a puzzle long lost and finally found. The minister began the ceremony, simple and short, while Noah played with the petals on the ground. But it was during the vows, right as John promised to love not just Emily but the son who had brought them together, that Noah wandered up and wrapped his arms around John's leg. "Daddy," he chirped, and just like that, the entire park held its breath. John looked down, eyes wet, and bent to pick up the boy. Holding him with one arm and Emily with the other, he whispered, "I love you, son." In that embrace, under the sun, everything that had once been broken felt whole again. John had not rescued a young mother. She had rescued him from grief, from isolation, from a life so polished and empty it had nearly swallowed him whole, and in the place of loneliness, a new family had been born. Not from blood, not from planning, but from a whisper, a question, and a plate of mashed potatoes. They were not perfect. They didn't need to be. They were together. And that, finally, was enough.